Good afternoon and welcome to our show. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen. If you're visibly Indigenous, this episode is something you'll most certainly know something about, probably even be an expert. Followed around retail stores, ignored at restaurants, harassed by security. It doesn't seem to matter if you're well-dressed or obviously gainfully employed. It doesn't matter. It's the color of your skin that makes you a target. Today, we are putting Shopping While Brown in focus. Christmas shopping season is upon us, and if you look white like me or you're visibly Indigenous, we'll have much different chances we'll have much different shopping experiences. We want you to join in this conversation. Our phone lines are open now. You can call us toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. You can also tweet us at APTN InFocus. Before I introduce you to our guests, let's go back to the APTN Vault, to a story we ran in 2013. The statistics obviously wouldn't be up to date, but the problem remains 5 years later. Let's watch.
Angel PANAG isn't a big shopper. The 19-year-old Dalhousie University student goes out to buy the basics. One day while shopping, he noticed something was up.
They were, watching me kind of from the side of their eyes. They were, following me, whatever aisle I was going in. And mind you, there was 3 staff members working that day, and 2 of them were on me. One of them was working at the front register.
PANAG says when he confronted the manager, things got worse.
Wow, so I got their names anyway. I was able to get their names, and I went outside and I told them don't delete the video footage, and they told me get out of the store. You're never allowed back in the store. I said it's fine. I don't want to come back in the store.
Today, Nova Scotia's Human Rights Commission showed PANAG is not alone. In a report called Working Together to Serve All Nova Scotians, a survey of retail shoppers shows that not everyone is treated equally. The statistics in the report show that Aboriginal people and African Nova Scotians face the most discrimination while shopping for goods and services. That nearly 20% of Aboriginal people were refused service while shopping. 3/4 report being followed by employees. Nearly 30% of Aboriginal participants reported being searched, and 40% reported at least 2 incidents of racial profiling at shops in the last year. However, the authors of the report say that it is not seeking blame.
When we assign blame, it doesn't resolve anything. But if we choose to educate people, if we choose to have conversation, what this report has done, it has raised awareness about some of the issues that's going on in our communities.
But this elder still shakes his head at the thought of it.
What caught me off guard, you wouldn't expect it in this, we're 2013 and we're still doing this to each other.
He says he was targeted while shopping.
You just have to realize people that are like this have low self-esteem and they're usually power tripping.
The Commission did not include recommendations in its report. Its goal is to let people in the province know that racial profiling does take place. No one was available for comment at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Ozzy Michelin, APTN National News, Halifax.
Joining us now in studio is Amy Anderson. She's just a regular working wife and a mom who went a little bit viral on social media this weekend after posting about an experience she had in a Winnipeg restaurant with her parents. In this post, she wrote, it took an hour to be seated, and once they were seated, another hour for food to arrive. We saw other non-native clients served first and treated with courtesy, but my parents were ignored. My mom had to approach the general manager several times that no one had taken their order or their food beverage orders. The post went on to say, I experienced treatment like this all the time. My dad and I get followed in stores, store floor staff bum rush us all the time. I get fed up with treatment like this. Amy, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
So your post got like 1,400 likes.
Yeah.
And the comments that were on it, somebody tagged me in the comments so I would see this story, and I thank them for doing that. The comments was full of other people who have experienced the same type of thing, whether it be at that same restaurant that you were at or similar, right? So tell me a little bit about what it was that shook down when you guys got there. You went there to meet, it was a hotel restaurant.
Right.
You went to visit a nephew.
Yes.
And we're in the restaurant, and your post had said that it took hours to get served, but what else happened while you guys were there?
Well, the restaurant, my parents have been at this hotel numerous times, and it seems like it's the same service, the same treatment, and it just so happened that both my mom and my food were tampered with. How could that be a coincidence that both of our meals were tampered with, and hers was raw chicken, and she's an elder. And, you know, that could have made her physically ill. And for myself, like, there was like a pubic hair in my food.
Yeah.
And at the time I couldn't think of, you know, people were telling me I should have took evidence, I should have took the wings, I should have took this and that, but at the time I couldn't think about it. All I kept thinking about was there's a lot of Indigenous kids that stay at this hotel. They're not going to know the difference if they're eating food that's been tampered with. So my mind went to them, and I got physically ill. Like I had to induce vomiting to get this out, because my meal out, because I thought, what if I swallowed more?
And you were thinking that your brain went to, this doesn't just accidentally end up in somebody's food, or your food isn't accidentally. There was a photo of the chicken too, like it was not anywhere remotely being cooked. So your brain goes to, I've watched the staff, how we've been treated in here by the staff. I've watched how they treat other Indigenous patrons in this restaurant. And your mind goes to, I think that this is what they do for fun, is to tamper with food of Indigenous patrons as well. That's kind of what you were thinking? Yeah. It just felt, honestly, it did feel discriminatory towards us. And did you guys bring it up before you left? I think you said something your mom had. Yeah, my mom went and approached the front desk staff, and she just called them out on it and said, "Are you guys racist here?" And she pointed out the facts. And the lady gave my mom a hard time and actually was defensive and argued with my mom about the facts. Like, "Oh, we're busy here." And my mom said, "Then hire more staff, expand your dining area." Well, and being busy doesn't take away from the fact that in that post you had said you had seen other non-Indigenous customers, they were being treated with courtesy, they were getting service that was more prompt than everybody else who has brown skin and was forced to wait. Right. This isn't the only place that has happened to you. No. What is some of your other experiences shopping while Indigenous? We've gone to a couple of, those store chains like Giant Tiger, Walmart. My dad, I push him around, he's in a wheelchair. So we get followed right from the entrance, right until we get out. And if we pick something up, they approach us, and whatever we touch, they fold back. And they're watching us very closely. And we ignore it, because a lot of, this is our daily, I hate to say it, but this is like our daily experience. And we look past that because it's a lot of ignorance. It's hurtful though, right? You know, to think of you're going shopping and you're spending the same money that somebody else is spending and you're getting different treatment. You're being followed around, there's that suspicion hanging over you. Yeah, and it's hard to get out of that thinking too, to be paranoid like that. It is hard to get out of that because it is obvious that this is happening, and it's sad to say, our daily reality. Have you ever brought it up? Have you ever said to somebody, I know what you're doing here? My family and I come from a line of pastors, and we weren't taught to react in anger. So we don't approach, we don't retaliate. We just, forgive that person because they're not educated on Aboriginal issues. Yeah. So I was going to tell you a story about my dad that he went into a shopping center. This was around the holidays. This was, I think, about maybe 2 years ago. And he was sitting in his wheelchair. My mom left him, and my mom went shopping. So he was sitting there alone. And just because he was Aboriginal in appearance and he was in a wheelchair and he was sitting there, he had so many people come up to him and they were giving him spare change. And he runs a business on the side. And he came in with money because he was in the city shopping, Christmas shopping. But people went up to him and they were giving him money, and he was like, "What's this for?" And they said to him, "Buy yourself a coffee, buy yourself a hot meal." And he was like, "Okay." So he was putting all the change in his pocket. And when we met up with him that evening, he put all the money on the bed, and he was like, "Look at this." I'm like, "Where'd you get all that?" And he said, "People at the shopping center were just giving me change, lots of them." And I counted $30. And they didn't know that he had a wallet full of hundreds. He has a wallet full of hundreds. Yeah. You know what? I'm glad for him that he just kept collecting it, so you could have that little social experiment to go home and have that conversation with your family. People just assume, if you're sitting here you're at a mall and you're not inside spending, you can't be just sitting here and be a regular person. You must be. He likes to people watch too, so he was just sitting there and observing. And then his granddaughter, he gave the change to her, and he said, "Here, my granddaughter, use this." And she's like, "Grandpa,
I wonder if I pushed you around the store and we waited, and if I held a cup, me and you could make a killing.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the restaurant though. So after this post, you post this on Saturday?
Yeah.
Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah.
And it's shared, people are liking, people are commenting. This catches the eye of the manager at the restaurant.
Right.
And so he found out how to get in contact with you.
Yeah.
Well, how did that go?
We had a good discussion, about 20 to 25 minutes. He acknowledged that there were over 100 vouchers used that weekend with a lot of the Indigenous programs or agencies that use the hotel. Yeah,
this hotel in particular is one that CFS agencies a lot in Winnipeg use to, where they can have kids in care can meet up with family members who have come in from out of town for a meal or whatever. So CFS gives vouchers to these families so they can have a meal with the kids in care. So when you say how 100 vouchers were used,
that was over the course of the weekend.
On the weekend.
Yeah.
So these Indigenous people are regular patrons of this establishment, right?
Yeah,
so
and he acknowledged that, and he did say that this was not okay, the behavior of his staff. And I said, I want to look at the situation as proactive, and your staff need to be educated and learn sensitivity on Aboriginal issues, especially with a lot of these children that they're coming in from remote communities and flying in, and it's not easy to travel, and they need to be aware that, and to be more sensitive to First Nations people. So I told him maybe that education needs to be brought, and that awareness needs to be brought to his staff.
And what did he say? Any specific measures? I mean, good for him for reaching out to talk to you directly about this. Did he give you any indication that he was going to be taking a certain?
Yeah, he already said that he launched an internal investigation amongst his staff. He wanted names. I gave him a few names, including the name of our server who took the pubic hair away, and the cook who was on duty that night, and the server who was rude to my daughter, my 2-year-old. So he wanted names, and he wanted the name of the person at the front counter. So he said this needed to be addressed, and that he wanted to repair any damage that was caused with a lot of the First Nations, and he acknowledged that this wasn't okay.
Good. Well, we are going to hold him to that, because we sent 2 people from APTN InFocus, to go undercover to investigate if this restaurant has changed or not. And we'll have them on later in the show, one of them on later on in the show, to discuss what happened. I want to ask you, before we have to cut to a break, what do you think would help people? You mentioned in our conversation about first contact, something like first contact. Is that an important part of getting better service in these stores, is for people who work in the stores and the restaurants to have a better understanding of Indigenous people? And what do you think they could do to gain that understanding?
Basically, to give them a general understanding of the struggles that First Nations people have. They need to empathize a little bit for First Nations people, like our people. And if they were shown the First Contact episodes, I suggested that that would shed some light on a lot of the issues that we struggle with, and maybe that would create a general understanding for people, and maybe it could shift their attitudes. Because I know on the show there was, out of the 6 people, I'd say 4.5 attitudes were shifted towards Native people, and if you could change 75% of their views, then it's worth it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, we're going to have to go to a break now, but when we come back, we're going to hear from some of you who have experienced Shopping While Brown, and we have a guest joining us in studio who is an expert on consumer racial profiling, so stick around. Join our conversation now. You can call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like and watch us live on the APTN News Facebook page. Follow and tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts in an email to infocus@aptn.ca. Hello, welcome back. We are going to go to social media now to see what you're saying about today's topic. We asked the question, have you ever been followed while shopping? We've got Jenny who says, every time, never once can I browse in peace. Saw a lot of comments similar to that. It's a constant thing. We've got Sean McDougall. He says, nope, probably because the way I'm dressed. So that's interesting too. Maybe if you could be brown or indigenous or just off-white, and how you're dressed is different. We'll discuss that later. Danny says, my answer is yes, and my children have also experienced this as well. We've got Howard. It seems funny when I'm not followed, and I'll go and look at something and wait till they start following just so they don't accuse me of stealing because they're right behind me. Interesting strategy. It's so sad. It's so sad that this is the reality for people. And we've got Nicholas. Nicholas says, I got more followers in Walmart than I do on Instagram. Haha, that's very good. Okay, and then we have a very interesting one here from Irv. Irv was a loss prevention manager for a few years, and he commented on our Facebook page. And one of the supervisors routinely alerted me, this is Irv talking, one of the supervisors routinely alerted me to suspicious people who were plain and simply just native. Nothing suspicious in the least. I would ask what makes them suspicious. Well, they're suspicious. So I would ask for clarifications. I don't think her thought process changed. She just stopped pointing out the natives. A side note, 90% of the people we caught, not native. If you would like to add your opinion to this on our topic today, here is how you can do so. Join our conversation now. You can call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like and watch us live on the APTN News Facebook page. Follow and tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts in an email to infocus@aptn.ca. So in researching for this episode, we found the problem of shopping while brown, probably not surprisingly, spans the entire country. Last week we spoke to John Anderson from just north of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which seems to be another hotspot for retail racial profiling. Here's what he had to say. So John, tell me how often you get followed around stores when you're shopping in Prince Albert.
It varies. The frequency has gone down as I've gotten older, but I would say it happens at least every 3 or 4 months to myself. However, I must quantify that I'm a light-skinned Aboriginal person. But that being said, I'm often in the stores, and as soon as an Indigenous person walks in, almost with striking regularity, as soon as a very visibly Indigenous person will walk into a store, within 10 seconds you automatically hear security camera scan all this, or security camera scan all this, or personnel to this. So it's as soon as a person's walking into a store in Prince Albert, it's almost guaranteed that you can hear that in the store. And I've yet to be in a store over the past 10 years where if I haven't heard security camera scan aisle this or whatever.
And is this one store, or is it a bunch of different stores in PA?
It's a bunch of different stores.
Wow.
From major chains right down to locally owned businesses.
And so you're a parent too. How do you worry about your kids facing this type of discrimination too? Racial profiling? Well, I don't know how you want to phrase it, but.
Well, my kids have also been followed around stores. They're 12 and 11, so they're just at that age where they're beginning to have a little bit more independence. But it's always been part of our parental narrative that, okay, as an Indigenous person, you're probably going to be followed around stores. People are going to assume this. And when you're going into a store, don't put your hands into your pockets. Don't be looking around. Don't be, just keep your hands to yourself. Don't be touching stuff. Don't be doing this. And it's been part of our narrative as parents throughout our children's development that this is something that's aware. And then we are very open about it. And when they ask why, well, this is why. There are these people who are going to assume that because you're Indigenous, you're going to be stealing. Because you're Indigenous, you're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing that, and they're going to follow you around.
Wow, that's a sad lesson to have to teach your kids. So for yourself, whether it's been you being racially profiled when shopping, or if you've witnessed it happen to somebody else, have you ever said anything to the person who's doing it?
When I was a younger man, I used to. When I was a young militant individual, I would turn around and kind of, I would say something usually not very polite. But as I've gotten older and mellow, like I said, I fully admit that as a light-skinned Aboriginal person, I do have that white passing privilege, where I could, if I chose to, I could pass as a non-Indigenous person. I no longer confront, but growing up in Prince Albert as an Indigenous person, you have your head on a swivel. You're aware of it. You walk into a store and you're automatically looking for somebody looking at you, and so it's kind of it's part of our instinct as Indigenous people in Prince Albert that when you walk into a store, you're automatically going to be followed. You're going to be watched. They've got their cameras on you.
And you got to teach your kids that now too.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's the talk we have, and for myself, it's been happening to me ever since I was 5 or 6 years old.
Wow. Well, I thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. That's you're certainly not alone. I think we'll hear from other people who have the same experiences in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for bringing this to people's attention. And like I said, it's a common experience in our community. So.
Wow. Thanks so much, John. Have a great day.
No worries.
So we asked on Facebook, have you been followed while shopping? Over 450 people voted. 89% said yes, 11% said no. So it seems Indigenous people are pretty regularly followed. 4,500 people, sorry. And also now joining us in studio is Tomi Sojourner Campbell. She's a law student and founder of Prevent CRF, which is Prevent Consumer Racial Profiling. I can't speak today. I mean, I guess we just start with that. What is consumer racial profiling? Can I speak?
Consumer racial profiling is when you walk into a store and someone is following you, and it's the assumption that the person that's either in the store or going into the bank, usually racialized, Black or Indigenous, is going to do something wrong. Whether a security threat or the individual is going to steal something from the store. So there's different schools of thought. I have sort of expanded out consumer racial profiling in the definition to also look at issues of gender and appearance, because it's often not only the assumption that somebody's a threat, but it's in the way you get treated. And many of your guests have already said what they've experienced. You know in your spirit that something is not right. So when I look at consumer racial profiling, I look at the totality and the complexities of it, because it's not simply somebody being rude to you one time or 10 times. It's the idea that it happens and it's inhumane. And you're there to spend your money, and it's also about understanding what do we need to do about it. So I have the definition in a very complex way. Others will have more of a sort of academic version of that definition, where it's simply you're seen as a security threat as a racialized or Indigenous person, or you receive degradation or denial of services. But I know it's much more complex, and you can see it in people's stories.
And is it, you had said too, just appearance too, so it's not necessarily just skin deep, but judgments would be made how you're dressed or how you carry yourself.
Exactly, and you know, the conversations that I've had with people from, I was dressed well, whatever that is, right?
I just said that during the break.
Exactly.
I was saying this person was dressed well, as though that should make any, I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say as a qualifier.
But it's often people will say, if I just do this, if I just put my hands in my pocket, I have my bag open, I make sure that if I'm putting something in the cart, it's not close to my purse or whatever the bag that you have that you've brought in, then I'll be okay. And people are on guard, and they go into the store, the restaurant, and they brace themselves. What is my next experience going to be?
Yeah.
So,
and almost how can I avoid it? What can I do to make sure that they don't think the worst of me when you're not even doing anything wrong?
Exactly. And so when we look at consumer racial profiling, we try to understand it and unpack it. It is about people feeling as though they have done something fundamentally wrong by just being who they are. Yeah. You're there to spend money. You're there to have a service. Consumer racial profiling doesn't just happen in a retail sector. It happens in other service areas. And, you know, I think for me and for others who do this work, it is really important for people to understand that it's not about you. There's nothing you can do about your appearance. If you are in a tracksuit or if you're wearing a $3,000 suit, if you were targeted by an individual, either a store or a security guard, there's something about their own stereotypes and bias about what you represent that is the reason they're targeting you, as opposed to something you're actually doing.
And there's, when I spoke with Amy earlier, she had said, and she didn't say it today on the show, but when I spoke with her about what she'd posted, she said, it's unfortunate, like maybe this prejudice comes from a few bad apples who have ruined it for us. So maybe some Indigenous people have stolen, and that shouldn't, and it's ruined it for the rest of us. I'm guessing you would like to see those bad apples not even in the basket with any other apples, right?
Yeah, because I think people get caught up in the idea that consumer racial profiling is about theft, is about somebody going into the store and stealing. It is so much more, as Amy was sharing with her story and other people have shared. You know, when you get bad service at a restaurant, is that because you're about to steal something, or is that they're telling you, we don't want you here?
Yeah.
And that might be, when I was listening to the story about the food, and what was served. I mean, that violates every food health safety standard. So, you know, I think looking at what people experience and having these conversations are essential. Consumer racial profiling is a global issue. It's not just in, you know, Manitoba or Winnipeg or Toronto, and it happens to so many people, Indigenous as well as other racialized groups and people of African descent.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get back to you because at some point we need to discuss solutions, but we don't have time now. We have a caller right now. We have Katherine from Nova Scotia is on the line, from Member 2 Nova Scotia. Hey, Katherine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? How's Member 2? I haven't been out there in a while.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Love Member 2. What's your story, Katherine, or do you have a question?
No, I had some experiences with Walmart, and I found that to be the most racial Walmart stores. And I have gone to Walmart in different areas, up in Campbellton, in Truro, and you know, it's the same, you know. And I only went there to see what would happen.
And what happened?
To see if there's any changes in the attitude of Walmart employees from different parts of the country, and it wasn't any different. I don't buy stuff there. I don't go there.
So what happens when you're shopping in Walmart? Give us an example of what happens in the store.
People follow me.
Okay, it's a following thing.
They just keep following me, and I'll ask. I said, may I ask why you're following me? I said, I think I'm old enough to know what I want. You know, I'm more confrontational than anybody. You know, I say, well, I think I'm old enough to know what I want. What do you need to follow me for? You know?
And it's met with what? Do you sense they feel that they've been caught following you and then they disappear, or are they apologetic? Are they defensive? What's the reaction?
They're most of the time they're defensive. They're defensive. And when anybody's defensive, well, I got a right to be defensive too, because I don't know what I did wrong. I just know I didn't do anything wrong, and I shouldn't be treated like that. Or many examples. I've gone even out west. I've been in Manitoba. I've been in Edmonton. I've been to Vancouver. I've been to Winnipeg. I've been everywhere, man. And I experienced that in some department stores that are bigger, like Sears and Roebuck at one time. I'm in my 70s, and I've lived a life. I've lived a life, you know.
Yeah, and I thank you for sharing that with us, Katherine. We have somebody else on the line to talk about Shopping While Brown. This is Tyson, also in Nova Scotia. Tyson, are you there? Hello?
Yes,
hey,
I'm here.
You're in Millbrook. How is it going there, Tyson?
Oh, not too bad.
So you disagree with all of this? You don't think it happens?
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for the most part, I think people are a little too sensitive. and I'm a 100% native. And I have never had anybody follow me around or anything like that. It's just, I just think people are too sensitive. And there's people on my reserve that, it's kind of a reverse thing on our reserve here. We treat our non-band members and our non-community members better than we treat our own band members. And
that's interesting.
That's the only thing that I have really noticed.
Huh. Have you ever raised it when you see it happening? Have you ever raised it to the people involved?
What's that?
I said when you see this happening, this preferential, better customer service to non-band members, you've never said, hey.
I'll definitely step in and say something to leave them alone or whatever. But I don't. If I answer your question right, can you repeat it again?
I just asked if when you see people on your reserve who are dealing with non-Indigenous customers in a more preferable fashion than they do with band members, have you ever called the people on that?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard not to because I've all needed children, and there's say a person adopts a person and then they make them an Indian.
Okay.
And
okay, Tyson, thank you.
They have the same right. They have the same right.
Yeah, they do. That's true. Everybody does have the same rights. I just want to come back to Tommy, who's in studio here. Thanks for calling, Tyson. So when you hear Tyson say, I think people are too sensitive, and I don't see it happening. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, it's individual experience, and I think that's the key where you have individuals who may not have experienced consumer racial profiling. They might have witnessed it but not seen it as anything other than this is a daily experience. And I can tell you that when I have conversations with Indigenous folks, when I have conversations with people of African descent who've experienced discrimination, but they don't call it consumer racial profiling. They call it, this is my daily life. And this is what I experience. So they don't see it, and the conversations are there where people say, well, someone's just joking, or don't go into the store, as a way of just addressing it. So it's not unusual to me to hear folks say that I've never experienced it. But that's not to say that it doesn't exist. And
exactly.
And so there's a balance, and I think addressing it in a way that gets people to have that conversation, because I can tell you the folks who have experienced it end up having a lot of trauma, and they live through sort of intergenerational trauma. We can talk about a few stories that happen that are through the Human Rights Commissions, what the commissions have found with people's experiences. And it's a detrimental issue in terms of thinking through what people experience, but also taking them seriously so they don't think it's just in their head.
Have you seen so far these reports? I know I think it was the Ontario Human Rights Commission, they were looking at this specifically and going, we need to figure this out. Is there anything useful in what they've come up with so far to combat this?
So the Ontario Human Rights Commission in 2016 did a racial profiling dialogue. So they looked at a number of different issues, racial profiling in police. I, in fact, was the only person at the time, only researcher looking at consumer racial profiling.
Okay.
So I put forward a submission, and it ended up becoming a chapter in a book that was published by Irwin Law called Damaged Goods. So the critical perspective on consumer racial profiling. But in terms of the conversation, people are sharing their stories saying, businesses need to do better. They need to know that it's not just an experience that I'm having or the other person is having. It's actually infringing on my rights under the Human Rights Code. So it's an illegal, it's not supposed to happen. And so there is a difference between a nice to have and have a conversation, but actually looking at the law, and the law says no. You're supposed to provide services equally to everybody, free from discrimination.
And is there hope? I had read something that you wrote, that you're looking for light at the end of the aisle, which I loved.
Yes.
Light at the end of the aisle
Yeah.
for consumer racial profiling. Do you see light at the end of the aisle?
I see, I would say I see flashes of light at the end of the aisle. There's a lot of work to be done. It is something that is under-researched, and in terms of actually, it's under-litigated. Most people who have experiences do not go and file human rights complaints.
Right.
They rarely will go to the store because, as you've seen in the stories, people will go to the store managers and say, this is happening, or the employee. They're often banned from the store again.
Yeah.
So it's a reactive response. They use the Trespasser Property Act, which allows businesses to control who's in their space.
Right.
And once that happens, you don't have an avenue to go back into the store, because you're not allowed. If you're there, you can be arrested. So we need other places for people to speak, but I am hopeful, and I have to say that the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission has put together an online module. It's about 20 minutes.
Oh.
So it's a beginning place for people to talk about, and businesses to start bringing their customers and also their employees into a space where we can have that dialogue.
Interesting.
Through Prevent CRP, we do that work as well.
That's something we can mention when we come back. We're going to have to take another break quickly too, but that's something we should discuss after the break, and something that we could put up on our websites where people can go and access these things too. Okay, so we will come back after another break, of course, and we'll be joined by one of the APTN staffers who went undercover to the restaurant where Amy had her experience. We'll find out after that conversation with the manager what, if anything, changed in the restaurant. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about Shopping While Brown. Last fall, a 4-minute video was posted online by an Indigenous man after he recorded a store employee following him while he was shopping for groceries. Here's a CTV Regina story with all the details.
Who are we? Hey! A small group of people with the American Indian Movement Saskatchewan gathered outside the giant tiger in support of Ezekiel Big Knife, the young Indigenous man who was followed for more than 4 minutes inside this giant tiger last Thursday.
I'm gonna go grab rice and butter. Come on, man. Follow me.
The group is also calling for an end to racism and racial profiling.
We're here to voice and give our voice of reason to our people, to let them know we're beside them and we're standing behind them all the way.
People need to realize that this is Treaty 4. This is our territory. This is our land.
In the video, Big Knife says this specific employee always follows him every time he shops at Giant Tiger.
I just go there and shop and pay for my items and leave, and I don't know why he'd follow me for whatever reason. I didn't do nothing.
Giant Tiger has since suspended the employee involved and has reached out to Big Knife and apologized. In a statement, they said, "What occurred in the video in question is a direct contradiction of our brand values as well as our policies and should never have occurred." Karen Smith with the Better Business Bureau says issuing an apology to the customer is the right thing to do, but a good business is expected to do more.
Words are fine, but probably like to see something a little bit more than that.
KATIA HILDEBRANT is a sessional instructor in education at the University of Regina who is researching social justice discussions on social media. She says instances like Big Knife's is a common everyday occurrence.
I think that what we're seeing here is just one example of kind of the structural racism faced by Indigenous people.
HILDEBRANT says people should stand up to these kinds of incidents in person and through social media.
As a white person, I need to be kind of aware of what's going on around me and calling out things that happen that I see that might be examples of this type of structural racism.
So we wanted to see for ourselves, Beverly, Andrews, and I, I'll introduce you to her in a minute. We took off to a mall on Saturday, and we went separately into the shops to find out what, if any, difference in experience that we would have. This is Beverly sitting beside me, Beverly Andrews. She is our InFocus producer, and how long were we there? 2 hours? 2 hours. 2 hours in the mall on Saturday. What were your observations as we were shopping?
Well, there was at least 4 stores where I visibly knew, I knew that they were keeping an eye on me.
Yeah.
Nobody outright
tailed me, but I did, like, they were making eye contact with me. They were, I had one point, one girl just came up and just stood right beside me while I was looking at wallets. And she had just said hello to you.
Yeah.
They didn't know we were together, but she just said hello to you and then came over and watched me, but didn't say hello or ask me if I needed help.
We should qualify. I have all of this on video, but it was just really bad video. I'm not a camera operator. I've learned in this undercover sting operation. But there were some things too that you didn't necessarily notice until I told you after the fact, which could go to what Tyson was saying. Our caller who called before saying, I don't know, these people are maybe just imagining this stuff. I don't notice any of these things. Beverly had left one store and would have been out store and walking down the mall, and there was a guy who came running to the door behind her and gave one of these, like honestly one of, like that looking, to see almost like what she had on her, and then saw she didn't have anything and came back in. She wouldn't have noticed that, right?
No, because it's subtle. It can be really subtle.
Right.
Because people are trained on how to look for tells. So example, if someone's walking out the door, if they're assuming that the person might have something in a pocket, they'll look to see if the person pulls it out of their pocket or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot going on. But in terms of, you know, the idea of people actually stealing, it only happens when you leave the store. That's when that's when theft has occurred.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that what's happening and the targeting of people is just, it's heartbreaking, really, when we think about it. In terms of, and then the fact that if you don't see it, like Tyson mentioned, then you'll never know. And so part of the not seeing is other people witness it though, and they're seeing it.
Yes.
And if they tell you, then you feel that extra layer of humiliation.
I think there should be something, you know, as somebody who saw what happened, we as consumers as well should be saying to those people, I saw that the only person you went to the entrance of the store and looked after they left was a person who's not white.
Yes.
And I just want you to know I saw that. I'm not asking for an explanation, but I saw it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the solution too,
That's
right?
part of the broader solution, that people, you know, they talk about bystander intervention, not just watching it happen over and over again, but say something. Because you may in fact have more, in that moment, you may be able to interrupt what's happening. The surveillance, that's, you know, the over-surveillance of Indigenous people in stores and in banks and in other places. And if the manager is not expecting, and may not be expecting, or the employee, that an individual they're not surveilling to come up to them and say something, it may change how they operate.
Yeah. Another thing that I know, well, there was another incident that happened. We were in a men's clothing store, and nobody had come up to either one of us. Beverly was in a different part of the store and had her back turned, like looking at shelves. And I caught out of the corner of my eye a gentleman who was working there walk up to this other gentleman and start talking. And then they both were looking at her. I was trying to catch it on my cell phone video, but I was watching it, but my cell phone was angled not, so you did miss it. But they were saying something. And so then I thought, well, it could be something like, have you helped her yet? Oh, no, I haven't, have you? So you would expect one of them to go up and offer her assistance.
Yes.
And that didn't happen. When Beverly left, one kind of just repositioned himself and was casually watching as she left. And, you know, I guess they looked and went, what would you have possibly stolen? It was in a big suit store, right? So you didn't. But I thought that was another thing too. And she, of course, doesn't know this is happening because she's busy doing her thing looking this way.
And that was one of the stores I thought I didn't get cased in.
Yeah, you thought that was
I totally thought that they just saw me as another customer, and I went and looked at a few shirts and I left, and I didn't have any idea until Melissa told me that had happened.
Okay.
What was the most awkward store for you? Like where you felt it was...
There was an accessory store, a higher end accessory store that we went into, and I was looking at wallets. And just the woman who like said hello to a bunch of other customers and then just came and stood beside me, literally like 2 feet away, never said hello, never asked me if I needed anything, just stood there. And so then I casually moved and looked at another table and she followed. And that's when I was like, yeah, this is very adamant. And that store where you said that the employee watched me leave, I did know while I was in the store that he was watching me. Because every time I would move around a display, he was on the other side of that display, you know, doing the fidgeting thing where he's pretending to like fold stuff, but everything's folded, like there's nothing for him to do there. And we actually made eye contact and I smiled at him and he flipped his head really fast the other way.
And
So.
without asking if he could help you. So it wasn't, he was in there in a helpful way.
Nobody asked me. He did greet me when I came in and said hello, but he never asked me for assistance after that.
I think there was interesting too is how I was always asked for help. Oh, hi, how are you? Can we help you with anything? Everywhere we went, I got that. That wasn't the case. You got it sometimes.
I got, out of the 10 stores we went in, I think maybe 3 stores said hello to me and asked and like offered.
The shoes, remember the shoe store? I had 3 different people in this tiny shoe store come and offer to help me, and not one acknowledged that she was even there.
And
it would be great video if the video had worked.
Well, and that's a part of consumer racial profiling. It's not just about people assuming that you're going to steal. It's about the lack of contact, the lack of respect that's afforded to the individual that's come into the store to purchase an item, where you're either looked over or looked through.
So, sorry, but that actually happened in a kitchen gadget store where we walked in and the 2 clerks working in the store actively avoided me. So like I was walking and I was making eye contact and trying to smile and they would look the other way. Me and Melissa were standing nearby each other and they said hello to her and asked her if she needed anything. And then as soon as she was done, I smiled at that clerk and she literally just turned her back and walked away. Like actively ignored me.
Do you still see these things happening when you go out shopping?
I do. I know in my own experience and the experience of my wife and other people in our lives, that happens all the time. The decision has to be, I know in my context, if I see it happening, I know that I have the awareness and the skills in terms of I know what my rights are.
Right.
But I'm still mindful that if I say something because I'm a big black person, there's maybe the next thing will be, instead of saying, we would like to talk to you, what's your issue, it may be the phone call to the police.
Right.
So I'm mindful of the steps that I need to take to ensure that if I'm going to engage in a conversation, that it's done in a way that keeps me safe and the people that I'm with safe. But it's still, so I have done it. I have intervened and I have talked to different store owners and said, this is completely inappropriate, because they also have customer service guidelines.
Right.
And many stores talk about diversity and inclusion, and they talk about corporate responsibility, being in communities and nurturing those communities. So part of this conversation is really about that as well, about teaching their employees, but also acknowledging when the employees are overstepping boundaries and undervaluing the people that are in that space.
Yeah.
Because there's something really, I guess, detrimental, so a sense of self when someone turns around and you're smiling at them, you're looking them in their face, and they literally turn around, like you said, and walk away like you don't exist.
Yeah. And so when you call them on this, do you find that there's any positive that comes out of it?
You know what? Lately, because you've had the Starbucks incident, you've had Shoppers Drug Mart, and in 2015 there was a Ontario Human Rights Tribunal order that Shoppers Drug Mart had to make some changes. Particularly, it was an individual store, but it happened that there were some ripple effects in terms of having conversations. There are stores that are stepping up to making sure that they're addressing the issue.
So there is light at the end of the aisle.
There is light at the end of the aisle.
But we got lots still to go and change.
Yes.
Beverly, 2 things lastly that I wanted to talk to you about. So when we go shopping together, how do you leave there feeling what? How did you feel at the end of that? Because we did have different shopping experiences, right?
It does make you feel pretty sad when you realize that everyone has been served or asked for service and you haven't. And when I'm there to spend money, like we were going to see how we got reactions, but I was also looking for a wallet.
Yeah.
Like I was there to buy money or to buy things, and that makes you not want to buy things. And I have stopped going to stores because I go in and I'm ignored.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel really horrible as a person. And that's on top of the fact that, I'm getting followed around.
Yeah.
And and as an Indigenous person, it's been happening to me my whole life since I was a child.
Yeah.
And I know, you have that feeling when you know someone is suddenly around you everywhere you go. You know.
Yeah. You're not going to go, at this age, we're not going to go home and cry about it, cry ourselves to sleep about it, but there's a lot of damage that happens for people when you start from early childhood realizing this is what your life is going to be, right? As our caller from PA had said, having to teach your kids, because of the color of your skin, you're going to have to shop differently than regular people. Here's the rules for when you shop. Here's how you do it. So we went back to check up on Amy's restaurant where those problems had occurred. You and our intern Daryl Stranger had gone last night just to check it out after the manager had said that he was going to be making some changes, talking to his staff. What happened?
We had a pleasant experience. The servers came promptly. The food was fine. We didn't seem to have any problems with our food, and we did check because of Amy's experience. But it seems like they might have had a conversation where they're trying to address this. On a note, though, there was the restaurant was fairly full. There was another Indigenous couple who came in and sat down for a minute and did sort of seem like they were uncomfortable there and left. So I can't say if they were uncomfortable or they just didn't like the crowdedness. But other than them, we were the only Indigenous people in that restaurant.
Perfect. Okay, well, that is all the time that we have today to talk about Shopping While Brown on today's In Focus. This episode will be available for download as a podcast on our website, aptnnews.ca/podcast. You can catch up on any of our shows on aptnnews.ca. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks again for joining me. Thanks, my guests. Have a wonderful afternoon.